Okay, and welcome back to Zero Cool Gaming. And today we're going to be doing a review of a game called Resistance 2.
Get off me!
Easy, Sergeant! It's harmless.
Alright, so if you watched my last review, you remember me telling you about how each game in this series continues to get more twisted as the story goes along. And as I describe the first part of this game to you, you're going to understand what I mean by that. One of the first things that you're going to notice is that the game starts out exactly where the last one left off. And while you're flying through the air, you're going to see mobile weapons platforms in the distance that look kind of similar to the ones in the first game. But once you get down on the ground and you actually get a good look at one, you'll see that these are much larger and much more difficult to destroy. That's one of the first things you're going to notice. As far as the Chimera ground troops or the grunt-like soldiers, they're basically the same. There is some differences. One of those differences being that they will dodge out of the way much faster than they did in the first game. Then you're going to come across a Chimera, which is a giant beast of a creature that lives in the water. And although you do have weaponry to drive it away, it's basically impossible to kill one of these things. And then once you actually make it to the surface, you're going to realize that what's going on is a invasion fleet that just ship after ship after ship of alien technology all over the skies invading the world. So what started as a infection of sorts has turned into a full-scale alien invasion with advanced technologies. Not that they didn't always have advanced technologies, don't get me wrong, but definitely on a much larger scale at this point. Then you're going to find an angel that is not as alien as they were in the first game, where they have a human aspect to them, a part to them, where the human mind and consciousness is kept intact, so that these angels not only have their hive mind to access, but a human brain worth of knowledge and thought to access as well, so that they can better understand us, which just makes them even more dangerous. And then you're going to find a new type of brute. Now these brutes, even though they're not the same as the old brutes, the new type have active cloaking, making it impossible to see them unless you disrupt that cloaking or it's moving through water and you can see that there's something moving through the water that isn't actually there. So they've made some interesting advancements to the enemy types thus far, which is a good thing. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to downplay it. It makes this game a little more difficult and a little more interesting. And then we get into the actual story itself. So you end up in this research facility / detention center, and you spend the next 2 years there going through different types of surgeries and treatment to ensure that the viral infection that you have doesn't take you over. And it's made apparent that most of their tactics that they've used on others aren't having much of an effect on you, or they're having unexpected effects, things that they did not or have not encountered before, making you a unique specimen, to say the least. But the base itself eventually ends up being attacked and invaded, and then you have to fend off that invasion. You have to deal with a kraken, which is a giant chimera creature that lives in the water, that is slowly tearing the base apart, that is underground. And then even when you get to the surface, you'll have to deal with it before your evac helicopter can get to you. While all that's going on, there is a kind of treatment that people like you and others like you that they've discovered need in order to retain their humanity, and you have to go back into the base in order to retrieve that. Once you've retrieved that, you end up on a convoy headed toward another place, and that convoy ends up being attacked. They put a bunch of debris in the road to stop the convoy, and then once it's stopped, the all-out assault starts to occur. You have to fight your way out of that, and then shortly after you do, you come in contact with your first cloaked brute as it slaughters somebody who's in front of you that you were following. And then you have to continue to work your way down this same route, knowing that this thing is somewhere out there hunting you. It can see you, but you can't see it. So, a terrifying situation, to say the least. There's several things about this game that I found interesting. A lot of the game is still the same game. They've just changed little bits here and there. You can move a little faster now. Your weapons are a little more effective than they were in the first game. But the most powerful weapons and the best weapons for your arsenal are still as sparse as they ever were. And when you do find them, you usually end up going through the ammo of those weapons long before you go through the enemies that you need to use it on. And that was true in the first game too. I mean, you had to be really sparing with your ammo if you wanted to have a chance in that respect. Otherwise, you learn to be sparing with your ammo because you would die in sections and have to redo that section, die in that section, have to redo that section, until you did learn this tool, where you needed to switch back and forth between your weapons all the time in order to bring down the more difficult foes that you faced, or the foes that were a long distance away. Some of those you had to take out, and others you could wait until you got closer, working your way through the fodder that they throw at you, and then you take out the ones that are even further away again. It's all a matter of constantly making you switch up what weapons you're using. That's really what's going on here. And they want you to get used to doing that and become effective at it, because this game requires it. Where the first game you could kind of brute force your way through a lot of it, this one won't let you. You have to use some tactics, otherwise you'll just die repeatedly. And that's not a bad thing, truly. I think it's a good thing that they make you change up your tactics and think about the arsenal that you have on you and try to utilize that to your best of your abilities to move through each section that it throws at you. There are optimum ways to get through each section of this game. Absolutely. And as long as you start to recognize those, you will be able to progress at a very steady pace all the way through it. It just depends on how fast you pick up on things. How fast you have pattern recognition as to what is throwing at you and what the best tactics against those patterns are. So, yeah, it's a pretty fun game. I like it. I like the whole series, actually. Alright, so as you make it into the town, of course you start to see these cocoons everywhere. And rather than these people being infected and taken to processing centers, they are instantly being cocooned by the particular infection that they are being infected with and turned into short-lived chimera. They're not designed to live for very long. They're designed to be shock troops. And as you move through the town, you find that the entire town has been turned into these cocoons. That there's nobody left in the town, period. They've all been infected, they've all been cocooned, and they're all getting ready to turn into shock troops. Which is a kind of depressing scene, to be quite honest with you. And, of course, you still have the same different enemies from the first game. You have the swarm-like enemies that kind of look like spiders. You have the giant brutes, the actual brutes, which are a little easier to bring down this time, but they still hit really, really hard. I haven't seen any of the dog-like creatures yet, but wouldn't surprise me if they end up showing up. But eventually, as you get through the town and you get to the next base, you find that it's being overrun very quickly. And the reason it's being overrun is because of all the troops being dropped from the ship that is above this base. So eventually you ask one of your team members if they're capable of flying one of the alien shuttles. And he's never actually flown one before, but he has been educated on derelict or non-functional shuttles. So he does have a conception of how they might function, and he's willing to give it a try. And the whole reason for this idea is to fly the shuttle to this drop ship, this huge, massive ship over the base, and take the ship out from the inside so that they can stem the tide of the invading forces. Once on board the ship, your team splits up into two groups. You head toward the command center, while the other team heads toward the engines. There's several issues that arise as you're, making your way through. The enemy starts to realize where you are. In fact, they've known since the second you got on board. One of the members of your team actually finds something like a security station where they work on masking your progress through the station itself, or through the ship itself. Then eventually the one team makes it to the engines. They set up all their explosives on the engines to bring those down. You make it to the command center and you're told to retreat, but you go ahead and set the charges before you do so to make sure that the command center is out of action, and they won't be able to restore any secondary systems or anything like that if they exist. And then you make your way out of the ship itself. Of course, it blows up, and that all happens. Once again, you crash land, and you have to work your way through an underground system to make it to the next base. When you get there, actually before you get there, you find a alien map showing the invasion fleet and what direction they plan on traveling and where they plan on splitting up to take out the human resistance that remains. And as a result of them having prior knowledge to this, they set up some ground defenses and some surface-to-air artillery, and they are able to take out one of the ships, which crashes into the one next to it, which crashes into the one next to it, and 3 ships end up being brought down as a result, and these are massive, just massive ships. After that, you learn that the aliens have taken one of the doctors that have helped you in the past hostage, and you decide that regardless of what they want you to do, it's more beneficial to the resistance to actually go save this doctor before he ends up a casualty of this war, because his insights and knowledge are valuable. So you work toward those ends. Eventually, some of the other military members get very upset with you about this, and they try to confront you and tell you that, as a direct result of you not following orders, you're now a liability, and you could turn on us at any time, and if you do, I'm going to kill you. And he's like, I'll take that challenge. And he, or your character, puts him to the ground and tells him that, basically, you don't care. At this point, you've got something that's more important that needs to be done. So you make your way to where he's a captive, and you break into the area, and you go through all the enemies that are between you and him, and then eventually you do make it toward the doctor. Once you get to the doctor, he explains to you that the aliens are working diligently to revive the progenitors of this invading force, purebloods, if you want to call them that, or pure chimera. And though they're trying to bring these things back out of their hibernation or whatever it is that happened to them, he understands the fact that these things can't be allowed to come back to life, and that there's some serious issues that will arise if they are allowed to do so. And he also explains how the Chimera don't look at this as humanity defending their home. They look at it as them defending their home, because they were here long before we were. At least in our current form. I mean, we evolved, this, that, and the other. And it's not like they actually left this world. They left lots of their technology and things like that buried under the earth to be brought back to life when they return, which is what has happened. So it's a very interesting story that continues to evolve. And like I said, that's one of the things that I like about this story, is that not only does it continue to evolve, but it continues to get more and more twisted as it goes. And that, in and of itself, makes for a very unique story that keeps you interested. It keeps you engaged. It keeps you wanting to learn more. And I think that they did a good job in that. I think that they as they continue to improve the gameplay, they continue to make the gameplay actually more difficult and engaging in the process, that they have created a unique system with these games where those who chose to engage with them found that the experience continued to get better as the series moved along, as the story moved along, as each new release of this story was made available. And that's not a common thing with games, truly. A lot of time you'll find that the first game in the series was rather lackluster. The second game in the series is the best of the series itself. And then for whatever reason, by the time they get to the third game, it goes back down again. It's very rare that you see a constant improvement from the first to the second to the third. That is not the norm. At least not as far as I've seen. And it's not like that I've played every game out there and I know everything. I don't. But of the games that I've played, this kind of game design, this type of story arc, this constant improvement that made it more engaging and more interesting, and you want to learn more, and it actually gave the impression or the desire within you to learn more, is rare for me to see, to say the least. The only other series that I can think of that was like that was the Legacy of Kain series, where the first game was, it wasn't bad, it was an interesting story, absolutely. Soul Reaver was a completely different game altogether, so I couldn't really compare the two, not as far as the gameplay was concerned. But the story was still pretty engaging, even though there wasn't much story there in the first Soul Reaver. And then the second Soul Reaver was a very engaging story. There was so much there, where it just improved upon every aspect of the first game. I can't really say that about Blood Omen 2, but by the time you get to Defiance, which was the last game, the story actually diminished a little bit. It wasn't as engaging, it wasn't as intense as Soul Reaver 2 was. So again, it starts out low, gets better as you go, and then the end of it drops off a little. But that's the closest that I can come to what happened with the Resistance storyline and the Resistance games. Alright, so you proceed to a tower that isn't active yet, and as you start to proceed to it, you find that there is a gigantic chimera the size of a building between you and the tower, and it's dead set on preventing you from getting to it. And while you fight this thing, it picks you up and throws you around, and it makes for different gameplay at the very least. Eventually you end up collapsing a bridge onto it and then shooting a rocket into the hole created from the bridge collapsing on it, which finally brings the giant creature down. Then you make your way into the tower itself. You fight your way through the tower, and the doctor tries to shut the tower down, but before you can permanently do so, Daedalus, which is another angel, ends up activating the tower from a remote location. Excuse me. That remote location is in Iceland. Now, throughout all of this, you haven't been able to receive any of your treatments to prevent the infection from progressing through your body. And at this point, you can start to see physical changes that have occurred. And you can see the physical mutations that you're going through. as a direct result of that. One of your team members tries to talk you into giving up on this mission and going to a medical center where they might be able to slow down and possibly reverse the progression of the infection that is obviously ravaging its way through your body. But you tell him that there's no point because you really need to take out Daedalus before he causes more problems for the entire species, and ends up doing something that can't be reversed. And currently, there's still a glimmer of hope of ending this war and hopefully saving mankind. It's not a big hope, it's not a lot of hope, but there's still some hope. Because you know that whatever Daedalus has in mind, the end result will be the elimination of the human species as we know it. So you decide to head out and head toward this inactive tower in Iceland. And once you start to head toward it, of course you hit a lot of fierce resistance. At this part in the game, it starts throwing you the normal soldiers, but with better armor. And because of how this armor is, the most effective shots that you can take against the enemy to conserve ammo is headshots. And the problem with making headshots is that their heads are constantly moving, which makes it very difficult to land those shots. I would imagine that this game with a controller would be, or not would be, it is incredibly difficult. Luckily, this is one of those games that you can also, even though it's a PS3 game, you can use a keyboard and a mouse. It allows for that. Not that a lot of people would, but if you did do that, it makes getting headshots a whole lot easier. And of course it makes your tracking system, being your hand, a whole lot faster than the auto tracking that comes with the controller. Because a lot of times the auto tracking won't auto track the headshots, it auto tracks the body shots. And I'm sure it's set up that way deliberately. It's just little things like this that I noticed about the game. But this is another reason that I also like the PS3, is because it allows you to use different types of input. Whether or not people choose to use it, that's their own decision. Most games on the PS3 I do use a controller. Of course, most games that I play are actually RPGs, not first-person shooters. So there's that as well. The only time that I found it necessary to use a keyboard and mouse on a console like the PS3 was when the controller was making the game more difficult than it had to be. And this is one of those games that the controller made the game more difficult than it had to be. For whatever reason that was. I'm sure that they tried to make it easier in their own way. Maybe they just expected you to play this game on easy mode. If you were playing it on the PS3, I have no idea, to be quite honest with you. But I took it as a challenge, truly. And, challenge accepted. My aim, especially back then with a keyboard and mouse, was pretty accurate. I could land 80% of my shots where I wanted to. It wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I had pretty quick response time. Of course, today I don't. My response times today are atrocious, but, I'm old, so it doesn't really surprise me. I knew that my response times were going down just by my driving capabilities, and how far I could see has dropped drastically as I've gotten older. When I go driving today, I drive the speed limit, and I understand why the speed limits are set where they are. It's not necessarily, designed for the 23-year-old kid who can drive at 120 miles an hour and feel confident in his ability to avoid any problems. They're set for people who are older and need that extra bit of time and deliberately put themselves a little further away from the car in front of them, things to this effect, because they don't react as fast as they used to. It's one of the downfalls of getting old, is that everything kind of slows down, not just your reaction time and your eyesight, but your digestive system, you name it. Your entire body slows down. You don't heal as quick. Minor wounds become a chore to take care of. All of this sort of stuff. So, anyway, that's kind of getting off subject. As I was saying, this game's enjoyable, regardless of how you choose to play it. And the story's pretty interesting. I mean, it is a revenge story at its heart. At least part 2 of it is. And it's more of revenge / mercy. The guy who is Daedalus you knew from the first game. And he was your partner throughout the entire first game. And he was turned into the monster that he's become at this point. And completely controlled by the chimera that he had turned into. Alright, so you eventually do find the angel in charge that's getting ready to destroy the human race. But he ends up taking you down as a result. After which you wake up in a makeshift medical center where the doctor tells you that there wasn't much he could do and you've only got a few hours left before you lose your mind. So you decide to take on a mission to try and take him out again. And this mission involves, first you have to find the fusion bomb, and then you have to get that bomb onto the main ship, and that, of course, requires you to fight your way through a bunch more enemies. You do eventually find the fusion bomb. Then you have to fight your way to a alien shuttle, and then use that shuttle again to make your way onto one of their ships, the main ship to be specific. Once you're on the main ship, you split up, and the bomb goes one way and you go another way to ensure that they have open doors all the way to the reactor that they need to set it off next to. But you got to take down the shielding around the reactor so that the bomb can actually do its job. Eventually you're able to do that, and you afterwards have to make your way to where the bomb is, because the team that was at the bomb gets taken out. And when you get there, of course, you got to fight the angel again. After you fight the angel, it ends up passing on its abilities to you while you still have control of yourself. And then you use those insane abilities to just, wipe out the enemy instantaneously, basically. You become invincible at the end of the game. For a little while. Then you get on the shuttle, and the shuttle takes off. It gets knocked out of the sky when the bomb goes off. And then the guy who's with you on the shuttle, once he wakes up from being knocked unconscious, he finds that you're standing there outside of the shuttle and your mind's no longer yours. So he puts a bullet through your head, and that's how the game ends. So one of the ways that this game makes you stronger as you go through it is literally the infection getting worse. And every time that you go through another stage of infection, you become more resilient. You've got basically more armor and more health as a direct result of that. Of course, it doesn't, it's not like numbers go up. It's more like you could take more hits It takes longer for your health to go down, things to that effect. But all in all, it's a pretty fun game, and the story's pretty decent. It makes for a fun time, and the end of it I don't think is anticlimactic. I think the end of it is appropriate, especially for the story being told. Even though you die as a result, it's not like it wasn't heavily foreshadowed through the entire game that that's exactly what was going to happen to you. So I can't complain about any of that. That's where they obviously intended to take this story. And then, Resistance 3 will be a whole new story with a whole new topic that they choose to cover, a whole new way that they choose to take on this story, and it gets even more twisted than this one was. So all in all, like I said, this is an interesting series. It really is. Don't get me wrong, a lot of this game is kind of like a zombie apocalypse, the way that the enemies throw themselves at you. They have no regard for, I should say a lot of them have no regard for their life. It's more like swarm you with enough numbers to kill you, and if you're not prepared to take care of that properly, you will die. And it's easy to die in this game. It really is. Over and over and over again until you memorize the level, you memorize the spawn points, and you properly adjust your ammo for each section as you go through it. So yeah, cool game. I liked it. I like the different weapons that you get. I like the different abilities that you get at the end. I don't see a problem with basically making you immortal, and they're literally throwing everything at you at the end of the game, the most powerful creatures that you've been taking on throughout the game. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I get a kick out of it.
In the eyes of men, you would yearn for the beauty that awaits us.
Anyway, that's my rant for the day. I hope that you enjoy the rest of yours. If you could hit the like, subscribe, rumble, follow buttons, all that does help. And I will talk to you later.